I want to have a very brief discussion about this film here, Die Hard 4.0. You might not remember, or you may be too young to remember, when this film was released, it was widely considered the best film in the series since the original title. Really, it is quite easy to forget now, given this film's status as a joke, both as an action movie and a die-hard action movie at that, and it is one of the most laughable depictions of hacking and cyber warfare which Hollywood has offered to the public since or outside of the 1990s. When this film was released, you could find plenty of critics' assessments, as well as one I remember apparently from Bruce Willis himself, stating it to be the best film in the series since that first entry. It was considered a great action film. Some may have claimed a great movie in general, as has been said many times of the first film, and some went as far as to say it of the third film as well. And I think it was how fresh and balls out the film may have seemed compared to other action cinema possibly around it. It didn't boast the sleekness or confusing plots, by comparison anyway, of that contemporary Bourne trilogy, nor the attempted elegance and refinement of 06's Casino Royale film. Although people seem to claim it was the most satisfying John McClane romp released since 1988. It is difficult to imagine really how people felt this way at that time. The film seems obviously totally ridiculous and absurd now. Justin Long, the excessive, inane cyber warfare logic, an odd cameo appearance from, of all individuals, Kevin Smith, and John McClane performing sensational feats in action hero craziness, which disintegrates the supposed realism which this series' first film, and to a notable extent the third also, attempted to imbue this Hollywood action star with. The film just seems like a complete joke now. You would never guess it was so celebrated by the critical press and also on IMDb forums at that moment in time. Of course, it certainly had its detractors, those who had no intention of liking anything outside of the 80s and 90s, for this was the case for so many older, jaded, I have to have a job now so I don't like movies as much, younger, older people from my own much younger perspective, so no one really took their stated concerns particularly seriously. But they were right. It kind of was trash. It isn't as trash as what that fifth film from 2013 appears to be, but it certainly set the precedent for brainless garbage like that. I was quite young, in late primary school, when this film came out. I saw it when it arrived on DVD rather than at the cinema after having seen and rather liked the first three, and I can say that I got a kick out of it, but probably not as much as I would have liked to. And also, the more I watched all three, rewatching whatever DVDs you had before you went to bed at night, before you had a computer in your room to watch anything you want, you came to realize, 1 is brilliant, 2 you rarely have the motivation to rewatch, 3 is super cool for sure, and 4? I think 4 is actually kind of dumb. What an inane, unimpressive screenplay, not an overly impressive act of film direction, as far as major large-budget Hollywood action spectacles go anyway. It doesn't really feel like a die-hard film beyond the presence of a caricatured, electrified depiction of the quite iconic John McClane, and really, I can't think of any major, truly impressive action scene in the film. McClane rescuing Justin Long from some attackers is fairly standard, unmemorable fare. That ridiculous sequence of the helicopter is essentially just a meme at this point. There's that rather ruthless sequence wherein McClane kills a dangerous female henchman, no doubt to appease the mostly overweight fanbase who cheer and leer as McClane kills that crazy, sexy Asian bitch. Their plausible term, not mine. You know the scene was geared to provoke a reaction like that. And then some shootouts toward the end. One can't help but feel that standards were lowered in 2007. For as long as an action film seemed modern, I guess it was considered just fine. But by comparison to what action cinema has presented us during the 2010s, good and bad, no, Die Hard 4 is not impressive to us now. Actually, in a way, really not at all. We had The Raid, Redemption, Dread, John Wick 1 and 3, Fury Road, Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, or whatever else you want to name, to cite as our favourite action movies of the 21st century. Die Hard 4 especially seemed like a complete joke by any comparison. Who was even Len Wiseman, the director of this film? His feature debut was Underworld, from 2003, that Blade knockoff, but with a sexy protagonist like Resident Evil crap, and he followed that up with Underworld Evolution in 2006, which a young Christian boy like me looked at advertisements for and assumed it would be a very scary movie. I never saw it, but I assume that it really probably isn't. Followed by Die Hard 4 here. Then that totally terrible and utterly forgotten Total Recall remake from 2012. Does anyone remember that one coming out? And then, speaking of John Wick, that rather dismissed spin-off Ballerina, which was released in 2025, last year, as of this video's upload. Go look, this film has a Rotten Tomatoes score of 82%, I presume mostly consisting of reviews from the time of its release. Does this reflect the consensus around the film for any forum you would go on? Even on IMDb, this film was considered an utter joke by the early 2010s, and on places like Reddit, on a board sub, where they discussed movies or not, it was especially ridiculed by all the wannabe hacker, bored IT worker types, which at one time was everyone on the website, before the weird, brainwashed pod people DNC's more progressive than the labor movement creepiness, which took over America and colonized geek spaces on the internet, because the frat boys and jocks were too difficult to deal with, and the geeks rolled over thinking the girls would respect them more, and they think they're smarter than the average person. Pros: some decent action direction, Bruce Willis looks cool as a bold man, Justin Long can be slightly amusing at times, it makes me recall the cozy 2000s as they were from my own subjective perspective, and in some respects you get the sense that, as an action film, it is actually trying. Cons: the whole screenplay is just a crock of shit. Most of the action sequences simply just aren't very impressive. McClane seems so much more vicious and bloodthirsty in this, possibly even more so than he was in the earlier Die Hard 2. The colour palette of the film is bright grey and loud white lights, and some slightly green-blue hue suburban nighttime near the start of the film, and it doesn't gel as a Die Hard movie. It feels like an inane scenario which John McClane was placed in. Remember, he takes on a fucking F-35 jet and wins in this movie as an excuse to have a general die-hard action movie, but treating John McClane more like he's Rambo or Schwarzenegger protagonist than the vulnerable, constantly bleeding and uncertain cop that John McClane was, even during the rather excessive ridiculousness of that second film. Die Hard 4 doesn't have much use. It doesn't much satisfy as a Die Hard film unless you just want John McClane going around doing a bunch of ridiculous action shit while spouting sarcastic one-liners, in which case have at it, I guess. But honestly, the film just feels like a complete waste of time to me now, to the point where it almost mildly depresses me.